The photograph lives in a cardboard mount rubbed smooth at the corners, the way family things wear down to the shape of hands. The front shows a living room that could belong to almost any house on the street in 1920. A horsehair settee with its ceremonial doilies, a crocheted throw the color of oatmeal, a rug with a floral pattern that refuses to name any flower, and a mantle lined with pictures that already think of themselves as heirs. The father stands a little apart in his good jacket, chin lifted to the degree a man's jaw believes is prosperity. The mother sits with a composure brave enough to pass for comfort. A teen girl leans one shoulder toward her mother with a smile that tries to be grown and ends up honest. And at the far edge of the frame, almost an afterthought, the way children are added to rooms that were arranged before they arrived, stands a small boy by the window. He is turned 3/4 toward the glass. A hand rests on the sash the way children's hands find the things that keep a house together. His hair is combed straight, a little too wet with effort. He wears a sweater buttoned out of sequins, one button missed near the collar where mourning had too many tasks. He is neither smiling nor frowning. The expression is the one children use when they have learned that adults want the soft kind of quiet more than the chaotic kind. Eyes large, mouth obedient. It looks like obedience. It looks like so many things. The first dozen glances at the picture pass right over him. The center is where the camera wanted to land. But if you let your eyes do what the lens couldn't, if you learn to ignore the bright weight of the groomed, your gaze will find the boy, and then the window, and then the small, quiet mischief of truth the silver could not help but keep. On the interior of the window, right where his breath would fog the glass, a word is written with a fingertip. It is small enough to miss, and careless enough to claim innocence even when seen. The letters are slightly crooked, their strokes thick where a child pressed hard. The word reads the right way around because the photographer stands inside the room, photographing outward, and children write for the world in front of them. The word is simple: please. Below the word, etched faintly where the fingertip ran out of conviction or simply of warmth, are 4 little vertical lines and a diagonal crossing them. 5 days, a child's tally. Beside the boy's hip, almost hidden by his sweater, a small tag peeks out on a string looped around his belt. Only the corner shows, but the printer's numerals are legible if you lean close in good light. 27B. And in the glass, faint as if the window hesitated to admit it, is the reflection of a woman standing at the gate. A dark coat, a hat with a brim sensible and not at all fashionable, a ledger against her chest. She has turned away to speak to someone not in the frame. Her profile is a line that knows its job. Once you see these things, you cannot make your eyes behave as before. The room changes location. The boy pulls weight toward himself, as if gravity were a moral choice. To understand the picture, you have to step into the day that made it, the season that held the day, the year that decided to test everyone's capacity for bearing. The date penciled on the back is January 5th, 1920. The Great War has just ended a year earlier. The influenza that refused to be reasonable has finally spent itself, leaving behind thin bones, thinner wallets, and an appetite for luck. The town is a string of row houses with a mill at one end and a church at the other, as if industry and God were arguing over who owned the street. The father, his name is Walter, returned from France in 1919 with a cough and a quiet that frightens the people who love him. He works at the lumber yard when there is work and stands by the rail fence when there isn't, the scar on his forearm reminding him which world proved more orderly. The mother, Ada, who grew up learning how to pad stew without making it an insult, manages the family ledger in her head and with her hands. She watches prices the way some watch weather. She can mark time by the way a sack of flour settles in the bin. She hums the same tune when she irons that she hummed as a girl shelling peas, and the sound tricks the room into thinking this is simply another season and not what it is, a narrow walkway between 2 very tall walls. The older daughter, Ruth, works afternoons in the dry goods shop where the bell on the door believes in itself, and the owner believes in discounts that are really just compliments. She has learned to measure ribbon and conversation in the same length, exactly what the other person needs, plus 1 inch. She watches her mother for signals, the way a nurse watches a patient. The tilt of the head that means the house is short of butter. The cough into a sleeve that means Walter is having a bad morning. The boy by the window is Peter. He is 7 and small for 7 in the way children are, who have spent more time sharing food than keeping it. He keeps stones in his pockets that he believes are luck. He knows the footstep of every board in the house. He sometimes sleeps with one arm curled under the pillow like a squirrel, even when it is not cold. He collects the silver seals from milk bottles for their moon color and hides them under the windowsill in a little hoard because it feels like the kind of treasure that might one day be asked for. What is the photographer doing in the house? It is Monday. Ada cleans on Mondays and moves furniture as if change must be invited to find the best seat. The photographer is a neighbor's cousin who has turned a hobby into an income, one of the new breed who brings the studio to people and asks them to fix themselves in the place where they already live. He carries lamps and a tripod and a camera with a bellows that opens like an accordion holding its breath. He sets the chair just so and nods at Ada's mantle as if it were a guest of honor. "Lovely," he says, "if you'll sit. Father there, by the clock. Young lady, lean in. And the little fellow, by the window so we get the light." He does not know the window has chosen sides. Peter has learned not to write on glass. It is a rule that exists in his house and in many. Do not mark the good things. Do not leave evidence of need where the son can brag about it. But rules bring their own counters. Last Wednesday, the day Ada walked to the welfare office with a scarf wrapped so tight around her throat it thought it was a vow, Peter stood in this very spot and spelled the word please to the window, because there are some words that belong inside breath. He wiped it away when he heard footsteps. But the cold remembers. The oils of fingers remember. The day remembers for you when you forget. Today, as the photographer adjusts the lamp, the letters lift themselves back out of the glass as if the temperature of the room were a hand rubbing a coin until the face shows. Why did Ada go to the welfare office? Because there are times a family ledger learns a new column called if Walter's cough turns to fever, if Ruth's hours are cut, if the mill decides it needs fewer hands, if the grocer stops writing chalk numbers that say later. Someone at church, one of the capable women whose faces have been set into compassion by use, had said, with sympathy that sounded like instruction, "There's help. County foster. Temporary." Just until things turn, Ada had stood very still, the way a person does when an insect has landed and you cannot bear to feel it fly. Temporary, the county says, the way a person says "I promise" when they are looking over your shoulder. The matron at the office had a ledger with columns neat enough to put a person to sleep. She spoke of clean clothes and school attendance and board paid. "We place a child," she said, "to relieve a season. They return when the home is steady." She did not say that sometimes seasons grow pride and learn to call themselves years. The county assigns a case number, 27B, and writes it on a slip that will be tied to the child's person because tags make it easier for officials to treat people like parcels without saying they are. Just Tuesday, Ada tells herself. They come Tuesday. I will have him back by Sunday, as if days could be bargained with like eggs. Walter is told and goes very quiet. Quiet is not permission exactly. It is the sound men make when grief has been given a chair and will not leave until somebody speaks its name out loud. If he could, he would sell whatever he has left that the world wants. The world wants his hours and finds fewer reasons to buy them than he has reasons to sell. He stares at the stove and then at the window and then at the empty spot on the mantel where a photograph should be and says, "At least we'll have a picture. because sometimes the only thing a man can do is imagine a proof of love and call it a plan. So the photographer is summoned. He sets the stage. He shapes their heads into the geometry of a family. He does not see what a window sees. He says to Peter gently, "There, lad, by the light. Look here." Peter looks at the window instead. In the glass, the woman at the gate, Miss Carlyle, the caseworker, has arrived early. She checks her ledger because ledgers are a promise to people who can't afford any others. Her coat is good wool meant to withstand weather that ignores dignity. She is neither cruel nor cruel's opposite. She is a hinge. She will tell herself all day she is doing her best in a world that has decided to gamble affection for stability and always bet on the latter. Peter raises his hand and writes the word again because writing a word twice makes it truer. He writes it small because big asks too loudly. He adds the tally because tallies convert time into numbers, and numbers behave even when people do not. He presses his palm to the glass to feel the cold he will miss when he sleeps somewhere else. He wants to memorize the smudge his skin makes, so that when he looks at any other glass he can tell himself, "This is not that one." He does not know that fingerprints are the part of us the world keeps, even when we drop everything else. "Hold," the photographer says. "Hold, please." Even he says it. The word is a trickster. It means, don't move and keep safe and stay with me and be what I need you to be and do not change your mind. The shutter opens like a spoon scooping the room. The lamps put their small suns on the floorboards. The window keeps what it wants. After, the house waits for the photographs while pretending not to watch the door. Ada makes tea twice because making tea is the acceptable form of pacing. Walter says, "I'll have a look for work up by Shepherd Street," and returns with exactly the expression of a man who has not found anything except a new version of his own face. Ruth goes to the dry goods and forgets to measure a yard properly for a woman who looks like she has never been denied anything she could name. Peter sits on the windowsill and studies the slope of the street and the way the cat makes the neighbor's fence look like it has patience. Tuesday arrives with a cartwheel that hates itself and a knock that means business. Miss Carlyle stands in the doorway with a softness she puts on like a cardigan. "Mrs. Holt," she says. "Walter." She uses first names as if names can do the job of gentleness when gentleness is too heavy. There is a valise, small enough to be a joke. Ada has packed 3 shirts, a book of stories he likes because the hero is a rabbit who knows how to escape traps, and a pair of socks she darned with such care that the darn is a work of art. She tucks a lucky stone in the side pocket. She tucks something else in, too. A scrap of paper with the recipe for stew written in Ruth's careful hand. 1 onion, 2 potatoes. Listen for the boil as if it were a doorbell. Wait. Taste. More salt than you think. It is not for eating. It is for remembering what home sounds like. Miss Carlyle ties the tag to Peter's belt, and he allows it because sometimes allowing is a child's way of deciding the adults will owe him later. "Just a few days," she says. She has learned to say it like the weather. "You'll be back for Sunday dinner." She has said it to 23 children this month. 3 were back by Sunday. 7 were back later. 2 will not come back. The rest are pending, which is a word that behaves well until you ask it to sit down at a table with a child's hunger. They go. Ada stands in the doorway until the cart is a shape, then a blur, then a single sound. The squeak every third revolution, like an argument nobody wins. She goes inside and wipes the table as if meals are a thing you can prepare even when you have not the appetite for them. Walter goes outside and pretends the fence needs him. 3 days later, the photographs arrive in an envelope whose flap has been reused twice because glue can be coerced into loyalty. The prints are warm, the blacks thick. In the first, the family looks exactly like a family. In the second, a version the photographer printed because he liked it better, Ruth has turned her head slightly and looks like the future noticing itself. In both, the boy by the window stands with his hand on the sash and his eyes elsewhere. In both, the word is there. In one, the reflection of Miss Carlyle is stronger, because light is a fair-weather friend, present when it can boast about itself, subtle when it is asked to be. Ada holds one print to her chest, then away. She does this 5 times, as if approaching and withdrawing will teach her the right distance for grief. Walter takes the other and stares at it with the evaluation of a man who knows what's wrong with a board because his palms have felt it. "Look," he says, almost apologetically, as if pointing out a splinter in a piano. He wrote on the window. He does not say please. The word sits in the room anyway, perched like a bird that refuses to leave. Ruth reads the window before the faces. "He was here," she says, touching the glass with a fingertip to find the letters through paper. "He was here when he knew he was going." She sets her lip between her teeth for a moment, the way she does when she dislikes something the world has decided to do, then releases it. "I'll go see him Saturday. If they allow," she does not add if we can afford the car fare, she can walk. Saturday is mud. Distance wears its heaviest boots on Saturdays. The county home sits on a road that resents visitors. The building used to be a school. You can tell by the way the doors are wide enough for many to pass through at once. A smell of cabbage is loyal to the air. Children do what children do. They cluster, they mock, they appoint a leader with no paperwork. A matron at a desk looks up with eyes that have learned how to be both kind and unwilling to be fooled. Peter sees Ruth long before she reaches the steps. He stands, because standing is what the body knows to do when a person you love arrives. The tag has been removed. Tags are for journeys, not arrivals. He has a scratch on his cheek that will be nothing by Tuesday. He has the book with the rabbit in his hand, like an answer. He does not run until the matron nods, and then he does, and then the world returns to sense for the length of an embrace. "We'll have you home soon," Ruth lies, because sometimes lying is the truest thing a person can do when the truth will not sit in the room without breaking something. Peter nods. He believes because children choose to believe what keeps the wires from falling on their own heads. Time makes itself useful, or it becomes a bully. In this family, it does both. Walter finds work steady enough for that word to be used at the table. Ada tightens the ledger the way a seamstress tightens a dart. Sundays come and go with the pleasure of a roast when there is one, and the pride of a stew cooked well when there is not. Ruth takes extra hours. Her hands smell like brown paper and optimism. They bring Peter home the 3rd week of February, a day earlier than laws demanded, because Miss Carlyle is human after all, and because Peter has learned to watch people with a level gaze that makes them want to perform decently. The photograph goes onto the mantel, not because the family wishes to boast, but because sometimes proof must be displayed to remain proof. Guests admire it. They point out Walter's proud jacket and Ada's neat hair. They say Ruth has her mother's smile. Only a few, those who have learned to look where the subject is not, step closer and tilt their head until the window tells what the room would prefer to keep quiet. "What's that?" one might ask. "On the glass?" Ada says, "A smudge, because a smudge is the name you give a prayer when there is company." Peter grows up. He becomes the sort of man who keeps a hand in his pocket when he is thinking and takes it out when someone else is afraid. He works at the mill and then at the garage across from the mill because machines, unlike men, can often be coaxed back to life if you listen for what they are trying to tell you. He marries a woman who recognizes the tilt of his head as a weather report. He names a daughter Ada because some names fit old furniture and new people equally. The photograph remains on the mantel until mantels become less common, and then on a shelf until shelves become less precious, and then in a box until boxes become the way the past protects itself from being thrown away. It travels into the care of Ada the Younger, who becomes a teacher and builds a classroom where children learn that asking is not a crime. She keeps the picture in a drawer and brings it out when she needs to explain to herself why some children stand near windows more than others. In 1986, when the county records are being moved from a damp basement to an archive with a climate that believes in tomorrow, a volunteer catalogues a ledger from 1920. The entries are a choir of neat despair: names, dates, placed, returned, pending. She reads Holt, Peter, 27B, placed June 1st, 1920, returned June 19th, 1920. The numbers behave, the space between them does not. She makes a note in pencil, because pencil marks are the right kind of humble. Returned. It is the loveliest word in the book. Ada the Younger visits the archive for a different reason. Lesson plans. A photograph of the town square before automobiles turned it into a rehearsal for disobedience, and finds the ledger open. The word returned finds her because sometimes words get up and go to the people who need them. She writes the reference down and goes home to the drawer. She slides the photograph out into afternoon light, the way the old photographer would have wanted. She bends until the little letters find their square of sun. Please. She thinks of a boy who wrote to a window, and a window that kept its promises. She thinks of Miss Carlyle's reflection, how mercy and bureaucracy share a coat. She thinks of her grandmother humming over the iron. She thinks of her grandfather's quiet, which she used to resent and now suspects was a language she did not yet know how to translate. She tells the story to her students without telling it at all. She teaches them to look at the edges of pictures. She teaches them that silver keeps secrets better than gossip. She pins a copy of the photo to the classroom board and asks, "What do you notice last?" It is the opposite of what teachers usually ask. Hands go up. Answers gather. Someone says, "He's not looking at us." Someone says, "There's writing on the glass." Someone says, this one softly, embarrassed at having the right kind of heart. "He wanted something." "What?" she asks. The child shrugs. "To stay," he says, trying the word on, finding it fits more than one story and liking that. Years later, when the photograph is shown in a small exhibit about local families, ordinary lives, extraordinary details, the curator, a person with a good eye and a respect for restraint, resists writing a label that tells you what to feel. The card reads, "Holt Family, 1920. Note the child at the window." That is all. People stop longer in front of this one than others. They tilt their heads. They bend as if listening to a whisper on the floorboards. A woman in a red coat wets her thumb and rubs the glass lightly until the attendant looks alarmed. She laughs at herself, then wipes the place she rubbed with the edge of her scarf, as if apologizing to the past. A man with a cane leans closer and reads the tally marks for someone beside him whose eyes aren't what they were. 5 days, he says. The person beside him nods and says, "Too long," which is always true about 5 days when you are counting the wrong thing. What does the picture want from you after all this time? Not pity. Not outrage on behalf of a bureaucracy that was doing its best in the language it knew. The photograph asks for this simple thing. Look at the edges first. In every scene, every room, every story, glance past the chair and the bride and the proud jacket and the brave smile to the child by the window. Ask what is written there in a hand too small to force letters into compliance. Ask what reflection has snuck in with the permission of glass. Ask which tags the world has tied to people that you should read and then untie. If you are the sort who traces with a fingertip rather than an eye, you will find yourself globed in the reflection alongside Miss Carlyle. Your own face will hover in the pane near the boy's. You will see that the word belongs to more than him. Please, he wrote. Please, you think, to someone absent, present, unknown. Be kind, be patient. Be the person who takes one more minute before deciding what a family should look like. And the 5 little marks. Perhaps they are not days. Perhaps they are a counting of tries. Try 1. Ask. Try 2. Ask again. Try 3. Wait. Try 4. Keep the stew hot. Try 5. Come home. When you set the photograph back, it makes the soft sound old paper makes when it forgives your handling. You breathe differently for a few minutes. You notice your own window and the harmless grease of fingerprints gathered at its lower edge where small hands like to stand and narrate the street. You think of the word you might write if you needed to leave a message for someone in another room, another decade. And if you find yourself circling a small corner of the image with your finger, making the air's version of a red mark, you should know you aren't the first to try to point the world to the right place. That boy by the window, Peter, got to stay. Sometimes the happy endings in old pictures are shy and you have to coax them forward. Sometimes all you can do is savor the proof of returned next to a case number and let it stand as an argument against the idea that winter always wins. The photograph does the rest on its own, day after day, decade after decade. It reminds whoever is willing to look that the difference between harmless and holy is often just a window and knowing which side of the glass to read.